Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to talk about why the Timberwolves core is still viable, and it extends beyond a traditional big three. We're going to use the context of the Western Conference Finals to help us take a look at that. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Lockdown Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic week so far. It is actually a preseason game day. Two final preseason games tonight and tomorrow. Undoubtedly, the Timberwolves starters and regulars will play on just one of those two games, and we'll get another game like we saw Monday night where it's the young guys, the bench guys, the fringe rotation, the end of bench guys, the training camp guys that get the majority of the minutes either tonight or tomorrow. Today on the show, I want to dig in a bit on some lineup data from the playoffs last year, and specifically the conference finals, the matchup against the Thunder, the ill-fated matchup against the eventual champion OKC. And a couple of things here that I want to get into. One is using that lineup data to suggest, or not even suggest, I think to prove that the Timberwolves still have an extremely viable rotation, starting lineup, and, really, I guess, top seven. We know this for a fact, given their success last year. And then also some additional context there. ESPN has an article out about ranking the top cores, but they're really looking at big threes. And I'll explain why that's a bit outdated. We'll get into that a little bit, and then we'll close with some MVP thoughts, MVP candidate thoughts overall for the NBA, but specifically for Anthony Edwards. So that's upcoming here today. All of that on today's show. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. You can watch on YouTube. You can listen wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So the reason I wanted to kind of get into this was we recorded a Western Conference preview, what we call a squad show here at Locked On and within Locked On NBA. So there were, I think, 8 of us hosts on, so a little bit more than half the Western Conference represented to talk about kind of previewing the conference overall. We talked about the teams that we cover, but also some additional teams. And there was some Wolves love from our guy Matt Moore over at Locked On Nuggets, Hardwood Paroxysm on X, if you follow him there, as many people do. And Matt talked quite a bit about, or I should say, he had the Wolves in his rankings. I believe he had them second in the West, and I've had them third in the West for a while. He had the Rockets a lot lower. Actually, what he had is pretty in line with what I've been saying on the show. And of course, I haven't given my official predictions yet. We'll do that probably very early next week. Guess we only got a couple days next week before things get rolling. But he mentioned the Timberwolves as a team that just mismanaged their rotations in the conference finals against the Thunder. And he said the lineup data suggested they should have played big instead of switching to play small to try and align with what the Thunder were doing. And well, that was obvious in real time. I haven't really circled back to it on the show. And so I wanted to dig in a little, and Matt gave me the credit to Matt for giving me the, I guess, the thought process to be like, hey, we should dig in on this a bit. And then on top of that, ESPN had an article that came out, I think on Wednesday of this week, about the top big threes, an antiquated term, I think, an antiquated way of looking at which teams are good and which teams aren't. And I think they kind of prove each other. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So let's start with the actual lineup data from the playoffs last year. If you take the playoffs in their totality, okay, so technically it includes the play-in when it comes to filtering these stats. So it's 20 teams or whatever that actually participated, which is crazy. But only, 16 that really participated in at least one series and drill down further than that. But if we look at the overall best lineups in the playoffs, it stands to reason that the best lineup should be the teams that were left standing. Right. I mean, the teams that stood the longest, I should say. So your final 4 teams, et cetera. And that's true. So the top 5 lineups in the playoffs last year, 2 of them were OKC lineups, including the best lineup, 5-man lineup, I should say. 2 of them were Timberwolves lineups, and 1 was a Pacers lineup. Of course, the Pacers and Thunder played in the finals. You go deeper than that, and it actually gets a lot more diversified. You get into Houston, Detroit, Golden State, a couple of Denver lineups, Boston, who, of course, would have kept playing if it hadn't been for the, well, I shouldn't assume that, but very well could have kept playing if it hadn't been for the Tatum injury. But the number 2 and number 3 5-man lineups in the entire playoffs belong to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Only one Thunder lineup bested the best 2 Timberwolves lineups. And on top of that, and this is also fascinating, the number 3 lineup in the entire playoffs was a Wolves lineup, and that Wolves lineup played 357 possessions together. So it was the 5th most used lineup in the entire playoffs. The only other lineup that has that same kind of like it was used a bunch and it was really good, the Pacers lineup was the 5th best lineup in the playoffs, and it was used more than any other lineup. Halliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, and Miles Turner was used more than any other lineup in the playoffs, and it was the 5th best lineup in terms of differential at cleaning the glass. The Timberwolves, their most used lineup, 357 possessions, was a 91st percentile lineup and a plus 17.4. And guess what? It was their starting lineup. Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert. It was a plus 17.4 net rating at cleaning the glass, 91st percentile. And what happened in the conference finals? Rudy Gobert didn't play enough. If we're going to boil it down, I mean, Gobert played 21 minutes in the first game, which, that became a blowout. The Wolves were actually up at halftime. Remember that? The Wolves were up by 4 at halftime against the Thunder in game 1. The Thunder were coming off the tough series against the Nuggets. The Wolves were rested. And then the Thunder decided to go small. They dominated the third quarter and then also the fourth quarter. And so it's not like Gobert only played 21 minutes because of the blowout. This wasn't a blowout until midway through the third quarter. Ant played 37 minutes. Julius Randle played 36 minutes. What happened? Chris Finch tried to play small. Nas played 28 minutes, went 1 of 11, scored 4 points. Dante, Nickeil Alexander-Walker combined to shoot 6 for 25 from the field and 5 for 31. Excuse me. Is that right? No, 5 for 21 from 3. 6 for 25 overall, 5 for 21 from 3. Dante and Nickeil, because the Wolves chose to play small. Gobert played just 21 minutes. Less than any other member of the rotation, was just a -2 in a game that the Timberwolves ultimately lost by 26 points. That was just game 1. Game 2 was a 15-point loss. Gobert did play 30 minutes in that game. The Wolves tried to play a little bit bigger, but so did the Thunder. Game 1, Isaiah Hartenstein played just 20 minutes. Game 2, Hartenstein played 27 minutes. Gobert played 30. The Wolves lost by 15. So the Wolves tried to play bigger. It was obviously more competitive throughout. The Wolves were down 8 at halftime. Third quarter, again, is where it got away from Minnesota. Gobert played a little bit more and, had a better plus-minus, like individual plus-minus than Dante, than Julius, than a lot of these other guys when the Wolves tried to play small. And then game 3, from a minute standpoint, it's a tough thing to parse because Minnesota was up 20 at the end of the first quarter. So that didn't matter as much, but Gobert played 28 minutes. Hartenstein played 19. And then you get into the most competitive game of the series because really the other 4 ultimately were blowouts. Game 4, Minnesota was down 8 at halftime, came back in the second half and ended up only losing by 2 points. Gobert played 32 minutes and Hartenstein played just 16. So the Wolves decided to play bigger despite the Thunder playing smaller and putting Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace on the floor, taking Hartenstein off the floor and playing Chet at the 5. And guess what? It was a competitive game that the Wolves had every opportunity to actually win because the Timberwolves decided to play their game to try and play bigger instead of matching what the Thunder did playing small. And here's the thing. I'm going to talk about the Timberwolves' overall rotation and depth here in a minute. They have really good depth. The Timberwolves still have really good depth, but they don't have the right pieces to counter an Alex Caruso, to counter a Cason Wallace in terms of ball handlers, et cetera, on the perimeter. And that's still a dangerous proposition for Minnesota this year. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. We'll also get into the core conversation that ESPN is forcing me to talk about here, the big 3 stuff. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is into week 7 as of tonight, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Of course, betting Thursday Night Football is always fun. The line for tonight's game, Steelers at Bengals, is Steelers favored by 5.5 on the road. On a short week with Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. I said this the other day. I kind of like Bengals plus 5.5. They were frisky against the Packers on Sunday. They've got a veteran quarterback in Joe Flacco. And I don't know. I think that I don't mind Bengals plus 5.5. It's always a ton of fun to just pick one game and go, live betting. You could same game parlay it. Just really fun when there's one primetime game that you can lock in on. There's a lot of ways to bet. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right. Digging in on the depth piece. So my first point is the Timberwolves lineup is still really good, and they shouldn't let teams essentially bully them into, somewhat ironically, playing small ball. Like that's not the Wolves' primary game. Obviously, they can do it, but they were more dangerous when they were able to do it with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5. That's not what this is anymore, right? No cat at the 5 means you've got to play Naz or Julius Randle at the 5, and that's like Naz at the 5 works against certain teams. It works offensively. It's a tougher thing defensively, and you layer in some of the issues with like how Mike Conley was hunted defensively, especially in the playoffs last year. Like, you need Rudy Gobert on the floor. So the depth piece is still really important. At the same time, proving the point the Wolves have really good depth is that their actual best lineup in the playoffs, albeit in a lot less minutes, but the second best lineup in the entire NBA in the playoffs last year, only played 108 possessions together. So less than everybody else on this list, because Cleaning the Glass only ranks the lineups that played at least 100 possessions played in the playoffs. So this lineup only played 108 possessions together. But it was the second best in the NBA, plus 24.9. And that was Ant and Dante DiVincenzo in the backcourt with Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid. So it was a small ball lineup. But where was that lineup most successful? It wasn't against the Thunder, right? It was against a combination of the Lakers and Warriors, each of whom the Wolves beat in 5 games. But again, depending on the matchups, they can play small. You can play small against a team like Golden State that doesn't have a big, and it's going to go great. Against the Lakers, finally, Gobert just dominated and put up that 24, 26-point game or whatever it was as the Wolves closed out the Lakers. But you could also play small and have it go really well. You can't play small against the OKC Thunder. You just got to play big. If you look at the Timberwolves lineups in the playoffs, their most used lineups, which I think this is fascinating. If you look at their most used lineups in the playoffs, we talked already about the 357 possession lineup, 91st percentile. It's the starting lineup. We talked about the 108 possession lineup, which is the second best lineup in all of the NBA in the playoffs, 96th percentile. Their second most used lineup in the playoffs was a 0 percentile lineup in the playoffs, a minus 16.7. So essentially the worst team, or the worst lineup, I should say, in the entire playoffs. And that was Ant DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid. So guess what? The only difference between their worst lineup and their best lineup in the playoffs was Jaden McDaniels was in their best playoff lineup, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker was in their worst. Now, there's more noise to that. The matchup matters. We are only talking about a little over 100 possessions, but we're not talking about 5 possessions. We're talking about 100 possessions. They go from the second best lineup in the whole playoffs to the worst best lineup in the whole playoffs by swapping out McDaniels for Alexander Walker, which tells you a couple of things. One, Jaden was phenomenal in the playoffs. If you look at the on-off data, like that backs that up. He had the best on-off of anybody on the Timberwolves over the course of the playoffs by far. And by the way, the top 3, Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, and Rudy Gobert. Conley and Gobert still on-off plus-minus all-stars. They just are. They're great. They have a positive impact on winning. It doesn't mean you can play Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert for 40 minutes and have success doing that, right? That's not what that means. It means you got to pick your spots. It means you got to pick your matchups, all of that, right? But Jaden is essentially matchup proof. And if he stays on the floor, which he largely did in the playoffs, he's improved in the foul trouble piece of things. He was a 91st percentile individual player in terms of on-off, and he was phenomenal on defense and very, very good on offense. But again, the 5-man lineup just underscores a couple of things. Well, 3 things, really. One, the starting lineup is still really good. The Wolves should play big whenever they can. They should have Gobert on the floor, and Mike Conley is still a viable rotation piece, even though there are rough patches and teams will hunt him, etc. He shouldn't play any more than he did last year. I'm sure he'll play less, but he's still a viable rotation piece. Number two, the Timberwolves have viable depth. They can play small against teams that you can play small against. And it's up to Chris Finch and the coaching staff to figure that out, to push the right button, to pull the right lever at the right time, and not overextend, not pull the plug too quick on playing big because a couple possessions went awry, but stay the course. If you're convinced the matchup is the right matchup, first of all, identify the right matchup and stay the course with some of these lineups. And then the third thing is the Wolves are still really good when they do play small. And then also a side point, I'm not about to, denigrate Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I've done this a couple of times, not that, but I've done what I'm about to do on the show a couple of times, which is, look, Nickeil's a very good player. Nickeil is a big part of the Wolves' success. He was not good in the playoffs last year. Outside of his whatever point outburst against OKC, the body of work from Nickeil in the playoffs was not good, and the regular season was a little more up and down than the year prior. He's a really good player, and we don't know for sure that TJ Shannon's going to be as good or better than Nickeil in his first year as a rotation player. We just don't. The ceiling is higher, the offense is better, the defense, isn't, but it could be. All of the above are true. Nickeil did not play well in the playoffs last year. He is not the reason they lost in 5 games to the Thunder, but he was part of the problem. And this lineup data only underscores that. There's a lot of upside here with this rotation with Terrence Shannon Jr. in it. And Jaden, to me, this is not a bad segue to the ESPN piece of things. Jaden McDaniels, to me, is a massive key to this season. He was great last year in the playoffs, and he got better as the year went on. There's no question about that. And then he got better as the playoffs went on as well. And he's going to be a massive part of what happens moving forward for Minnesota. So we might as well talk about the ESPN top trios is what they're calling it, because I think they're trying to avoid the antiquated term of big three, which was a 2010 to 2020-ish thing that we talked about. But somehow ESPN's still doing that. They're ranking NBA roster tiers, ranking top trios for all 30 teams by Tim Bontemps. So he says, I'm just going to read what he says because I think it's kind of strange. He says the NBA may be in its depth era, but star power still wins the day. In a sport in which only 5 players take the floor for each team at a time, a concentration of stars has been a clear way to build a championship level team. But even when a team doesn't have a trio of ready-made stars, looking to the top 3 players in each roster is a good way to measure both the short and long-term health of an organization and where franchises head over the next few months and next few years. All right. By the way, then he goes on to say that they laid out the cores of all 30 teams and compares them to each other. Well, 3 players is not a core, first of all. I would argue the core extends beyond that. It could be 2, it could be 4, it could be 5. It's not 3. So I think it's really funny that they take a thing that they say isn't a thing and then they make it a thing, which is what this is. And it feels to me like this is somebody said, hey, Bontemps, we need to put together an article about big threes. And he's like, we don't really do that anymore. And they're like, his editor or whoever was like, I know we got to do it. So then he tried to shoehorn these big threes, which is just not the right way to evaluate teams. So number one, of course, is OKC. It's SGA, Chet, and Jalen Williams, which, again, like right here, it's funny. Like Chet Holmgren could end up being a top 25 player this year, but he's not yet. And Jalen Williams a year ago was not a top 20 player. He is now, but it's just it changes so much, and it's very hard to look at this as like this is the core, right? It's 3 guys who a year ago, nobody would have ranked them number 1 as a trio. Sure, a lot of people thought they could win the championship, but it was based on SGA and the depth of the Thunder. It wasn't based on, Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams are really good as 2 and a 3 in terms of a big 3. The Nuggets are tier 2, knocking on the door, which is interesting because, again, the strength of Nikola Jokic. Like, no one's sitting here saying Aaron Gordon's better than Jalen Williams or Jamal Murray is better than Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren. I don't think you can say that with a straight face at this point in Jamal Murray's career. So, I think that's kind of goofy. Best of the East, the Cavs, Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, the Knicks, Anunoby, Brunson, and Towns. I buy those. Tier 4, ascendant young teams. The Hawks. Now, this is apparently in no order within the tier. I think it's actually alphabetical within the tier. So let me say that. The Hawks with Risache, Johnson, and Risache, sorry. Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels. The Pistons with Cade Cunningham, Ron Holland, Asar Thompson. I don't know. Whatever. Alperen Sengun and Reid Shepard and Ahmed Thompson for the Rockets. And somehow the Wolves are in this tier with Jade McDaniels and Julius Randle. It's absolutely bonkers. First of all, they should be in the tier above. They should be in tier 3. I know it's best of the East, but like just stop with the cute tiers and just make a tier that's like, an actual tier 3. The Wolves should be in that tier. Ant is a top 5 player consensus, top 6, fine. Jade McDaniels and Julius Randle. Jade McDaniels is an ascendant star. He is. He's very young. People forget how young he is. Julius Randle's a top 50 player. I don't have my locked in NBA top 100 ahead of me, but I'm pretty confident Julius Randle's ahead of Reid Shepard, and he's ahead of Risa Shea, and he's ahead of I'm not positive he's ahead of Jalen Johnson. But the point is, it's too low. It's just too low. And it also, again, last year that in this same exercise, Julius Randle wasn't included because he's not on a long-term contract, and it was Edwards, McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert. And now this year they kicked out Gobert and they added in Julius Randle. And honestly, like it wouldn't surprise me if Gobert's on the team longer than Randle. I know Randle's younger, but Randle's going to be more tradable than Gobert, and Gobert raises this team's floor, and I think he will for the next 3 years or whatever, even as he ages, because of how good he is defensively. It might be in less minutes per game, but he's still going to have a positive impact on what the Wolves are doing. I just think it's such an antiquated way to evaluate teams, because I would argue that the core extends beyond that to Naz Reid. Like, how would you not include Naz Reid, who's young and just signed an extension? You could argue it includes TJ Shannon, who's an older second-year guy, but upside still. And Dante's still got 2 more years on his deal. Like, I think it's more likely Dante's on the team, that they extend him and trade Randle than Randle stays on the team. Like, it's just such a goofy way to evaluate the whole thing. You go on down the list, the Magic, Banchero, Bane, Wagner should be higher. Fox, Dylan Harper, Wembanyama. Like, if Wemby is what everybody says he is, and I think he probably is, but if people are ranking him 5th best in the league, De'Aaron Fox is an all-star. He's been an all-star. Dylan Harper, people love as a rookie. Like, why aren't they higher? It's a goofy exercise. It's not the right way to evaluate teams. And I think it also kind of proves the point. The Wolves have been to back-to-back conference finals, and they apparently have a tier 4 core. So, like, I don't know. You tell me. Is that the right way to evaluate teams? They've won an average of 53 games last 2 years. They've been to 2 straight conference finals, and their core is tier 4. It just doesn't make any sense. All right, we'll close by talking a little bit of MVP stuff. Zach Harper at The Athletic had an article that I want to dig in on a bit. We'll do that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Wayfair. The holidays are going to be here before you know it. I know, mid-October, but they're almost here. It's exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can feel like a lot. Maybe your serveware needs a refresh, or the guest room could use new bedding. I know that's the case for us. Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready. From Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, and outdoor inflatables, it's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge deliveries. We need to refresh. I really like holiday decor. I'm kind of a sucker for seasonal stuff. So right now, obviously, it's the fall decor, but I would love to get, like, I don't know, accent rugs, other holiday festive stuff, throw blankets, things like that, pillows, stuff my wife likes to get as well, to kind of spruce up the house for the holidays. Now is the time to do it at Wayfair. The best thing is that their delivery is fast and free. It's absolutely a lifesaver during what's everybody's busiest time of year. You can find pieces that fit your style and budget very easily. It'll all be in one place. The checkout is always a breeze. Get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's episode is also brought to us by our title sponsors over at Gametime. Basketball season is finally here. We're less than a week away from the start of the regular season, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it is easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. And that's where Gametime comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. You check out the Wolves start on the West Coast. They start in Portland next week, but you can look at the home opener the following Sunday, I think, against the Pacers. Exciting offense. No Halliburton, no problem. Rick Carlisle teams are a ton of fun to watch. You can head over to Gametime and find tickets for that game and more. The zone deals over there are the best. They're an absolute game changer. You can pick the section, and Gametime will pick your seats, and you'll save big. You can even find your NBA tickets for under $25 over at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account with the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKDOWNNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, so I wanted to close today's show by talking a little bit about the MVP race, and this is kind of spurred on. Tis the season anyway for that, and I made bold predictions about this last couple of years, and it's interesting to actually have a little bit of a different perspective on it this year. But I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. But Zach Harper at The Athletic, of course, has covered way back in the day, covered the Wolves for ESPN, in their weird, like, what was it, the Dime Dropper or whatever. Anyway, whatever. Like sub-site ESPN did with the live chat thing before X existed, or I should actually in this context before Twitter existed. And Zach did a good job covering the Wolves. He's been writing for The Athletic the last few years, and he wrote an article called "Predicting the 2025-26 NBA MVP" plus previewing the Lakers and Bucks. That's the headline. And then in his MVP prediction system, he takes he set up this system, the MVPs, very creative. He says, determined by many different factors that have been studied for centuries, as Zach says, broken up into 6 categories. And he ranks them 1 through 10 in the 6 categories and then comes up with the most likely MVPs. So there's the obvious candidates. If you're looking at the odds at FanDuel, like SGA, of course, to repeat, is the favorite. Nikola Jokic has won 3 MVPs already. Giannis has won 2 MVPs already. And there is a level of MVP fatigue, voter fatigue for these guys. Certainly, it's tough to win back-to-back. Obviously, Jokic has done it. It's tough to win 3. Jokic has done that too. For Giannis, the case is pretty simple. And this is me talking, not Zach. Well, it's probably actually a pretty good summary of what he's saying too. Is like, if the Bucks are good, it's because of Giannis, which means he would have to be really good because there's no depth to that team. They obviously moved on from Dame. Like, it's going to have to be all Giannis all the time, which means he's putting up monster numbers. And if the Bucks are call it a top 3 team in a weak East, then yeah, he could win MVP. The thing is, they're going to be so bad when he's off the floor that could they even be a top 3 team in a weak Eastern Conference? I don't know. The Jokic thing, I actually think Jokic, like, I would pick Jokic right now just based on the odds. Or actually, if I just had to pick straight up, I'd probably pick Jokic simply because the team around him is better. But like, not so much better that people will be like, oh man, Jokic has so much help, we should pick somebody else. It's Jokic and then it's everyone else. Like, it's not like he's got Steph Curry on his team, right? It's not like it's I don't know. I mean, that's actually not a bad example, but it's not like he's got another top 10 player on his team, right? It's going to have to be Jokic, but the rest of his team is good enough that Denver itself will be better in a really tough Western Conference. Layer in the fact that SGA won last year, and it's voters don't like to vote for the same guy 2 years in a row. Unless the Thunder wins 67 games or whatever and completely dominate, and SGA does the same thing, then he might win it. But then there's also Jokic would be winning a 4th MVP. Like, are people going to be cool with that? Luka would be another good candidate. It depends on how voters see LeBron at this point in his career, like, and obviously how good of a season LeBron has. But Luka playing in LA, Luka hasn't won one. He's apparently in shape and is going to play better this year, is more acclimated to LA. That's possible. Wemby, I think, is a long shot. Somehow, Ant's odds are longer than Wemby. I just, like, I don't know. I think Wemby's going to be incredible. I think the odds thing is crazy that Ant's so low. And also, by the way, that the Wolves are still like 6th in finals odds. I just don't understand that one at all because they lost their 8th man. A team that went to the conference finals the last 2 years lost their 8th man, so they're 6th in title odds. I don't get it. And their star's not 35; he's 24 or whatever Ant is. Anyway, the Ant stuff, he gives him an MVP score of 45 out of 60, which is ahead of Wemby, just behind Luka, behind the 3 guys who have, well, actually not behind. Yeah, sorry, behind the 3 guys who have won it before, in SGA, Jokic, and Giannis. He's got him behind Luka, ahead of Wemby, among the guys that he mentions. And then his conclusion is this. Luka has this best chance of the potential first-timers. And then he says, this probably comes down to Shea against Jokic. And then he says, but my gut says go with Ant, which is really funny because I have actually almost the opposite perspective on it. I think I would agree with the Luka having the best chance of the first timers. And I agree about it probably coming down to Shea against Jokic. But my gut, but I actually think that among the first timers, Ant has the most compelling case if you're considering the odds. If you're picking it straight up, I understand picking Luka over Ant. But if you're looking at Ant at plus 1900 or whatever he is on FanDuel to win the MVP, like you take Ant. The path is pretty simple. This is a good team that won 56 games 2 years ago, 49 games last year. Has been to consecutive conference finals. He's ascending. Everybody likes Ant, which matters whether it should or not is up for debate in an MVP vote. Ant is like, if Minnesota wins high 50s games, Ant's going to win the MVP. My gut tells me he won't quite be there yet. I think the Wolves will be a top 3 seed. I think they'll be really good. I think they'll win, mid 50s games. I'll give my official prediction early next week. And I think Ant will be the primary reason, but I also think he's not going to go supernova quite yet. I think he's got another year before it really clicks in. I think it's going to be SGA again or Jokic going nuts. If I had to bet on it right now, I'd go Jokic, and then I'd go SGA, and then straight up I'd go Luka and then Ant. But if I was taking the odds, I like Ant's odds the best for all the reasons I already laid out. I think there's a very compelling case for Anthony Edwards to win MVP this season. All right. That's all I got for you today. Tomorrow's show will be a post-game pod following the preseason game this evening. The Timberwolves are in Chicago to take on the Bulls. We'll talk Wolves-Bulls on tomorrow's show, post-game pod. And then the preseason finale, finally, is tomorrow night. And we'll get you ready on Monday for the start of the regular season. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder for your second listen, go check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, this show is also part of that very same podcast network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.